The sky over Earth darkened like a storm had swallowed the sun. But this was no ordinary storm. Ships larger than cities, black as the void, cut through the atmosphere with a silent, terrible precision. People stopped in their tracks, staring upward, mouths open in fear. Children clung to their parents, pets whimpered, and entire cities fell into chaos. Humanity had seen satellites, meteors, even rocket launches, but nothing like this. These were not explorers, nor traders, nor diplomats. These were conquerors, beings whose very presence whispered death. The aliens called themselves the Vorin. To them, every world was a prize, every species a potential meal or a plaything. Their history was written in fire and ash across countless galaxies. They were tall, with limbs too long, faces sharp and alien, eyes black pools without mercy. Their ships were alive with energy, thrumming with power that could tear mountains apart. And now they had come to Earth. On the bridge of the Vorin flagship, Admiral Kether gazed down at the tiny humans below. He had studied them for months through deep space probes and intercepted communications. He knew their strengths, their weaknesses, their fears, but he had dismissed their courage as fragile, their technology as primitive. "They will beg," he said to his officers, his voice cold as the vacuum of space, "and we will grant them none. They will learn quickly the meaning of fear." Meanwhile, on Earth, the human leaders scrambled to respond. World governments called emergency meetings. Military forces mobilized, and scientists worked frantically to understand the alien technology. But fear was faster than knowledge. Panic spread like wildfire. Entire cities emptied as people fled, leaving streets empty and silent under the looming shadow of the invaders. Even the strongest armies felt powerless. Missiles were fired, guns discharged. Fighter jets roared. But they were only sparks against the darkness of the Vorin fleet. Yet, deep in the forests, the deserts, and the oceans of Earth, something stirred. At first it was subtle, a rustle in the jungle, a shadow under the waves, a tremor through the mountains. Legends long forgotten by humans whispered to life once more. These were not mere animals nor simple predators. They were ancient guardians, creatures older than any human civilization whose existence had been a secret kept by the Earth itself. They had watched silently, patiently as humanity grew, struggled, and survived. And now, sensing the imminent danger, they awakened. The first to move were the forest guardians. Massive beasts covered in scales and thick fur emerged from hidden valleys. Their eyes glowed with intelligence, not madness, and their steps shook the ground. Birds fled, rivers rippled, and trees bent under their presence. In the oceans, enormous serpentine creatures surfaced, their long bodies curling above the waves like living mountains. Fins the size of skyscrapers cut through the water with terrifying grace. The mountains quaked as enormous winged predators lifted into the sky, talons sharp, wings slicing the wind. Humanity did not yet understand what was happening. Soldiers reported sightings and assumed hallucinations. Pilots claimed radar malfunctions. But soon there was no doubt. These creatures, the monsters of old myths, of bedtime stories that were whispered in fear, were real. And they were coming. People across the world paused in terror and awe. Cities filled with humans screaming in fear now watched silently as the monsters moved. No one knew if they were friend or foe, but there was a strange sense of hope in the air. Deep in the heart of the chaos, humans felt a new, strange emotion. Maybe it was awe. Maybe it was the first glimmer of hope that not all life on Earth had abandoned them. From the top of a skyscraper, a young girl named Lena watched a massive winged creature circle the city. Its wings cast shadows over the streets, and its eyes were like molten gold. She clutched her younger brother's hand and whispered, "They're here, to protect us." The words felt dangerous to say aloud, yet they carried a truth humans had long forgotten. In the oceans, fishermen and sailors saw something they thought was a storm. But it was no storm at all. A massive serpentine guardian rose, spraying water high into the sky, its roar shaking the hulls of ships. And beneath the waves, schools of strange, shimmering creatures moved in perfect formation, guided by intelligence beyond human understanding. Even in the deserts, ancient reptilian creatures emerged from hidden caves, their scales reflecting the sun like mirrors, their eyes scanning the horizon. Their presence alone caused sandstorms to swirl, and the humans watching could only tremble in disbelief. Back in the cities, the first alien landing craft touched down. The ground shook, buildings cracked, and smoke filled the air. The Vorin emerged with weapons that glowed with deadly light, and humanity's leaders prepared for surrender. But the monsters were coming. From every corner of Earth, The Guardians moved as one, silent, powerful, and terrifying. It was a moment that would be remembered for generations. Humans saw their planet rise in defense of them, not with machines, not with diplomacy, but with raw, untamed power. The monsters of Earth were alive again, and they were coming to answer the cries of their small, fragile children, humanity. And somewhere high above, Admiral Kethar saw the first signs of resistance and felt something he had never felt before: fear. The sky was no longer only his. The war for Earth had begun, and for the first time the invaders realized that this world was unlike any they had conquered before. The Voran forces moved with merciless precision. Their ships hovered above the cities like dark gods, releasing waves of drones and soldiers who poured into streets, smashing anything in their path. Buildings crumbled under alien energy weapons. Cars exploded. Roads split open. Humanity screamed, ran, and prayed. Leaders broadcast urgent messages, urging civilians to shelter and soldiers to fight. But the weight of despair was heavy, pressing down like an endless storm. "Beg for mercy," Admiral Kethar commanded from the bridge of his flagship. "It will do nothing but let them understand their weakness." His officers nodded silently, eager to see a species crumble under fear. The humans were small, fragile, and predictable, or so he thought. But the humans were not alone. From the forests, shadows moved. Massive shapes crept toward the cities. Trees bent as enormous limbs tore through the foliage. The first to arrive were forest guardians, beasts with scales like stone, claws like sharpened steel, and eyes glowing with a deep ancient intelligence. They did not speak or roar. They simply moved, a force of nature incarnate. When they reached the outskirts of a city, they shattered the alien drones like toys, their massive bodies unstoppable. Along the coasts, sailors saw dark shapes rising from the water, enormous serpentine creatures, their bodies stretching hundreds of feet, surfaced, spouting clouds of mist into the sky. Each movement of their thick armored tails smashed alien landers into the waves. Ships were capsized, weapons destroyed, and the Voran soldiers were forced back, unprepared for creatures born of myths and legends. Above the cities, enormous winged monsters took flight. Their wings spanned entire blocks, their talons glinting in the sunlight. They dove toward alien skimmers, tearing through their armor with ease. Humans on the ground stared in awe, not fully understanding whether to fear or to cheer. But deep in their hearts a spark of hope ignited. The legends of old were not dead. The monsters of Earth were real, and they were fighting for humanity. In the streets, humans began to rally. Soldiers, inspired by the sudden appearance of these giants, fought with courage that burned brighter than the lasers around them. Engineers and civilians worked together to create traps, funneling alien troops into ambushes. Pilots coordinated with winged monsters, their jets weaving between massive wings as they attacked together. Fear was still present, but it was no longer paralyzing. Hope had arrived alongside the monsters. Children hidden in basements and shelters peeked through broken windows. They saw creatures that had once haunted their nightmares now protecting their families. Lena, the girl who had seen the winged monster from the skyscraper, held her younger brother tightly. Tears ran down her face as she whispered, "They're not here to hurt us. They're here to save us." And she knew it was true. The monsters did not need orders. They understood instinctively who was friend and who was enemy. The first real battle erupted near a city park. A squad of Voran soldiers advanced, thinking humans could be easily crushed. But the ground shook as a forest guardian emerged, towering above buildings. Its claws tore through alien armor. Its roar was deafening, shaking the air, and its eyes glowed with fury. The soldiers fired their weapons, but their energy beams bounced off the beast's armored hide. Panic spread among the aliens. They had never faced creatures like this before, creatures that fought not for survival but for something they loved. From the water, a giant sea serpent lunged at an alien walker. Its tail slammed down, sending the machine flying through the air. The humans cheered from nearby buildings, their voices mingling with the sounds of battle and the roars of the monsters. The Voran realized too late that Earth itself had awakened against them. For every alien advance, there was a counterattack. The monsters were methodical, strategic, and terrifyingly intelligent. Winged predators targeted the enemy's air units. Forest guardians disrupted supply lines, and ocean creatures cut off reinforcements. And humanity, inspired and brave, followed their lead. They were no longer just survivors. They were soldiers of Earth, fighting alongside its monsters to protect their home. Yet the Vorin would not give up easily. They struck back with greater ferocity, unleashing powerful energy beams and devastating shockwaves. Entire streets were reduced to rubble. The smell of burning metal and smoke filled the air. Humans wept for the dead, screamed for the injured, and yet pressed on. They knew that surrender was not an option. They had allies far stronger than themselves. They had Earth itself. Amid the chaos, humans and monsters began to understand each other. A pilot dodged debris and signaled to a flying monster. The creature swooped down, lifting a Vorin skimmer and flinging it into the ocean. Soldiers followed the lead of the armored forest beasts, learning their movements, predicting attacks, and striking with precision. It was not perfect, but it worked. For the first time, humans tasted victory. Not complete, but enough to ignite hope. The sky roared with battle. Cities were scarred, but they were not lost. Humans began to fight not out of fear, but with courage born of love for their planet, their families, and the guardians who had returned to protect them. And the monsters, ancient and powerful, moved like living storms, their loyalty and wrath undeniable. Somewhere high above, Admiral Kethar watched in disbelief. No world had ever resisted him so fiercely. The humans were clever, yes, but it was the monsters, the very Earth itself, that made this planet different. For the first time, he felt uncertainty creep into his mind. For the first time, he wondered if conquest was even possible. The first strike had been devastating, yes, but humanity and its guardians had struck back. And in that moment, a single truth echoed across the battlefield. Earth would not kneel. The war had begun. But the Vorin would learn soon enough that these monsters and the humans they protected were not to be underestimated. The war for Earth was no longer just a struggle for survival. It was becoming a battle for hope itself. Cities were scarred. Smoke filled the skies and cries of the wounded echoed through the streets. Yet for the first time, humans felt a strange, powerful emotion: courage. They were no longer merely running or hiding. They were standing, fighting, and most importantly, believing that they could win. The monsters had begun to guide them in ways subtle but unmistakable. Forest guardians, massive and armored, moved through streets and alleys, crushing alien walkers and shielding fleeing humans. They never looked for thanks nor acknowledgement. They moved with a silent, purposeful intelligence, protecting the fragile lives beneath their massive limbs. And humans began to learn. Soldiers mimicked the monsters' tactics, using cover, timing, and patience instead of sheer force. Engineers rigged traps that drew Vorin units into predictable paths, allowing the Guardians to strike with precision. In the sky, winged creatures soared alongside fighter jets, their massive wings stirring gusts that disrupted alien flight formations. Pilots, initially terrified, began to coordinate with these beasts, signaling with flares, mirrors, and hand gestures. Together, humans and monsters became a symphony of destruction, striking the invaders in ways they had never experienced. The Vorin were powerful, but they were not adaptable. Earth's children were learning to fight like the planet itself, relentless, clever, and unyielding. On the ground, civilians played their part too. People dragged debris to block alien landers, created barricades from abandoned vehicles, and helped the wounded reach safety. Children handed water and supplies to soldiers. Families huddled together, praying silently. Their fear mingled with awe at the Guardians moving through their cities. In these moments, humans realized that courage was not just a soldier's gift. It was something they all carried inside. In a ruined city square, Lena watched a small group of humans climb onto the back of a forest guardian. The beast carried them across the battlefield, allowing them to reach trapped civilians. Her brother clutched her hand, wide-eyed, and whispered, "They're saving us." Lena nodded, tears streaming down her face. "We're not alone," she said softly. And for the first time, that simple truth felt like a shield against despair. The Vorin, however, were not idle. Admiral Kethar's anger burned hotter with every failure. "They learned too fast," he hissed. "They are adapting. They are united." The concept of unity between humans and monsters was alien to him. The Vorin conquered through fear, through division. But here, on this small blue planet, they had underestimated something ancient and unstoppable: loyalty and love for one's home. In the deserts, massive reptilian guardians emerged from the sands. They smashed alien vehicles, crushing soldiers beneath massive claws, and created walls of sand to shield human forces. In the oceans, serpentine creatures coordinated with human submarines and ships, dragging alien units under the waves before they could fire. Every corner of Earth became a battlefield, yet Humanity and its monsters were moving together as one. The Vorin had never encountered such unpredictability, such intelligence combined with raw power. Amid the chaos, small acts of bravery became legends in themselves. A young scientist, trapped on a collapsing building, used the debris to block a drone, buying precious moments for civilians to escape. Soldiers carried the injured across battlefields, while a forest guardian shielded them with its massive tail. Even in fear, humans reached deeper into themselves than they had ever thought possible, discovering a strength that the monsters seemed to recognize and respect. The humans' morale soared as the tide began to shift. Reports came in of entire alien units destroyed, of Vorin ships retreating after coordinated assaults. The monsters did not celebrate, they did not need to, but their presence gave humans the courage to keep fighting. The planet itself had chosen to defend its children, and humans, for the first time in history, felt truly protected. Yet the cost was heavy. Cities were in ruins. Fires burned day and night. Every victory was paid with loss. Soldiers fell, guardians were wounded, and civilians suffered. But even in the devastation, hope thrived. Humans realized that courage was not the absence of fear. It was standing tall despite it. And with the monsters of Earth beside them, they could face anything. In the skies above, Lena watched a massive winged guardian clash with a Vorin skimmer. The creature's talons struck true, and the alien ship crashed into a river, sending water and debris into the air. Lena's eyes shone with determination. "We can win this," she whispered. Her brother nodded, gripping her hand tightly. "We have to." Admiral Kether, observing from his flagship, could not understand it. Every tactic he had mastered, every fear he had instilled, every attack he had planned, seemed to crumble against the unity of humans and monsters. His soldiers faltered, his ships fell, and he realized with a cold dread that Earth was unlike any world he had faced. By the end of the day, the battlefield was a scene of chaos and courage intertwined. Humans had learned to fight like the monsters, and the monsters had learned to fight like humans, strategically with purpose. And for the first time in human history, a fragile species that had been hunted across the galaxy could stand and say, "We will not fall. We will fight. We will survive." The night fell quiet but not peaceful. Fires burned, cries of the wounded echoed, and the monsters returned to hidden perches and waters to rest. But humanity stood tall. They had faced the first wave and they had survived. They had learned that courage could bloom even in the darkest hour. And deep in the void above, Admiral Kether made a decision he would soon regret. Earth would not be easy to conquer. And when the monsters fought, they fought like no army in the galaxy had ever seen. The war was far from over. But humanity, for the first time, believed they could win. The sun rose over cities scarred by battle, painting the ruins in shades of red and gold. Smoke still curled into the sky, and the smell of fire and ash lingered. But a new sound echoed across the broken streets, the roar of monsters and the determined chants of humans. The battle for Earth had reached a turning point. Humanity was no longer just surviving. They were fighting back, and with each passing hour, the Vorin began to feel that this world might not fall as easily as others. In the northern forests, forest guardians moved with unmatched precision. They smashed through alien barricades and crushed mechanized troops with limbs that could topple buildings. Humans followed, learning their rhythm, coordinating movements and striking with a cleverness that the aliens could not anticipate. Every ambush, every strike, every careful maneuver showed that Earth's defenders were growing stronger together. Along the coasts, the ocean guardians, massive serpentine creatures, cut through alien ships like knives through paper. Their scales reflected the rising sun, glittering as they twisted through the waves, dragging enemy craft beneath the depths. Ships that had once seemed invincible now lay shattered and sinking. Human sailors learned quickly, navigating alongside the giants, dodging attacks, and even using the serpent's movements to trap enemy forces. In the skies, winged predators soared, diving and banking with agility that rivaled even the fastest Vorin skimmers. Fighter pilots signaled to them, and the creatures responded, striking in perfect synchronization. Alien formations faltered, their tactics unable to match the chaotic intelligence of the monsters. Humans and monsters had become a single force, a living, breathing army, unpredictable and fierce. Amid the battle, ordinary humans showed extraordinary courage. Civilians carried the wounded through rubble. Young men and women manned improvised turrets, and scientists hacked alien technology to turn their own weapons against them. A small group of children guided an injured guardian back to safety, their tiny hands holding onto massive claws with trust and determination. Humanity was no longer helpless. They were warriors, fighters, survivors, and they had allies stronger than any army in the galaxy. The Vorin, however, were relentless. Admiral Kethar unleashed devastating weapons, striking entire city blocks with destructive energy beams. Buildings collapsed, streets cracked, and fires spread across neighborhoods. It was a test of endurance, a trial by fire. Yet for every strike the Vorin made, humanity and the monsters had an answer. Forest guardians used debris as shields. Ocean monsters created waves to douse firestorms, and winged predators disrupted alien targeting systems. Humans adapted, learned, and countered with ingenuity born of desperation and hope. In a ruined square, Lena ran alongside a forest guardian, dragging survivors to safety. Her heart pounded, but fear was mixed with awe. She saw humans and monsters working together seamlessly, striking with courage that seemed larger than life. "We can win!" she shouted, gripping the hand of her brother as the guardian blocked a falling alien walker. Tears streaked her face, but she smiled through them. Hope had found a way into the hearts of Earth's children. The battlefield became a place of miracles. Entire alien units were destroyed by coordinated attacks humans could never have managed alone. The monsters fought not recklessly, but with precision, understanding the humans' intent, and humans struck with strategies inspired by the creatures themselves. They were learning from each other, becoming a force neither could achieve on its own. In the mountains, massive reptilian guardians erupted from hidden caves, smashing alien supply lines and cutting off reinforcements. Earth was fighting back in every corner, and the Vorin began to realize they had underestimated the planet. Their confidence turned to fear as waves of guardians struck, each attack stronger and smarter than the last. Admiral Kethar's anger grew. He had crushed worlds with terror before, but Earth was different. The humans were resilient, clever, and bonded with beings that seemed to carry the strength of the planet itself. No intimidation, no weapon, no strategy could break this unity. His soldiers faltered, his skimmers fell from the sky, and even his advanced technology could not keep pace with the chaos orchestrated by humans and monsters working as one. As the day wore on, the tide began to turn. Alien forces retreated in small groups, regrouping only to be struck again by the relentless guardians and their human allies. Victory, though far from complete, felt possible. The monsters did not cheer, but their presence alone inspired humans to fight harder, to push farther, to protect the lives they had sworn to save. Even civilians played a role. From rooftops, ordinary people threw Molotovs, guided airstrikes, and signaled soldiers. The monsters recognized their courage and adjusted their movements to shield them. Every act of bravery, no matter how small, strengthened the bond between humans and Earth's guardians. By evening, the battlefield was littered with the remnants of alien machines, smoldering wreckage, and victorious, exhausted humans. The monsters retreated to forests, oceans, and mountains to rest, but their eyes never left the cities. They had fought, and the humans had survived. Together, they had begun to turn the tide against an invader that had never been resisted before. Admiral Kethar watched the battlefield from orbit, his pride shattered and his confidence shaken. The humans were still alive. They were still fighting. And worse, the monsters had given them a chance that humans were seizing with courage and intelligence he could not destroy. For the first time, Kethar realized that Earth was not just a planet to be conquered. It was a world alive with power, loyalty, and courage beyond anything the Vorin had ever faced. They would not fall easily. The night fell, quiet but tense. Fires still burned, the air was thick with smoke and ash, but humanity stood taller. They had fought back. They had survived, and, most importantly, they had learned that they could fight not alone, but together, with monsters who had returned to protect them. The war was far from over. The Vorin were wounded, but they were still dangerous. And humanity, emboldened by their courage and the guardians who fought beside them, would face the next wave with unbroken resolve. Earth had begun to strike back, and the galaxy would soon learn that some worlds do not bow. The battlefield was a chaos of fire, smoke, and shattered metal, yet above it all rose a quiet, terrifying sense of purpose. Humanity and the monsters of Earth had fought together, and now they stood on the edge of victory. The Vorin, once confident and cruel, were faltering. Their soldiers trembled, their ships faltered, and for the first time in history they begged. Admiral Kethar's flagship hovered above a shattered city. He stared at the carnage below, his pride wounded and his confidence shattered. "Send reinforcements," he barked, but his officers shook their heads. Every unit had been cut down, trapped, or destroyed. The humans had learned, adapted, and coordinated with the monsters in ways he could not anticipate. Fear, something he had weaponized across galaxies, was now his own. On the ground, Lena and her brother moved with a group of civilians through the ruins. They were guided by a massive forest guardian, whose eyes glowed like molten gold. The creature's claws could have crushed them, yet it shielded them with care, moving like a living wall of protection. Lena's heart raced, not with fear, but with awe. "They're not just fighting," she whispered. "They're saving us. All of us." From the ocean's serpentine guardians struck with devastating force. Alien walkers, armored and terrifying, were dragged beneath waves in a display of raw power. Ships that had once seemed indestructible were crushed and twisted. On the coasts, human sailors cheered, their hearts lifted by the monster's unwavering defense. Every strike, every rescue, every coordinated attack showed that the bond between humans and Earth's guardians was stronger than any weapon. The Vorin soldiers, however, did not give up easily. They fired relentlessly, launching energy beams that tore through buildings and streets. But every attack was met with resistance. Winged predators dove, tearing through enemy skimmers, while forest and desert guardians disrupted alien advances. Humans fought bravely alongside them, using tactics inspired by the monster's intelligence. Together, they were unstoppable. Admiral Kethar realized that brute force alone would not conquer Earth. The humans had not only survived, they had grown, and they had allies more powerful than any he had ever faced. "They are not weak," he muttered, his voice tight with disbelief. "They are something more." In the midst of a ruined square, Lena watched a massive winged creature clash with a Vorin skimmer. Sparks flew, metal screamed, and debris rained down. The pilot of the skimmer screamed, begging for mercy, but the Guardian's talons were relentless. And yet the creature did not kill indiscriminately. It struck with precision, destroying the threat while sparing nearby humans. It was not cruelty, it was judgment. The humans had learned the same lesson. Mercy could be granted, but only to those who deserved it. On a hill overlooking the battlefield, Kethar finally saw what he had never anticipated. Admiral-sized monsters moving with intelligence, humans coordinating with them, and a planet itself pushing back against his invasion. Fear gripped him as he realized the truth. Earth would not bow, and the invaders, who had crushed countless worlds, would be humbled here. Below him, the last squads of Vorin soldiers faltered. They had no reinforcements, no backup, no hope. They dropped their weapons and cried out, begging for mercy. And the monsters of Earth answered, not with words, not with negotiation, but with the force of their presence. Each guardian moved like judgment incarnate. Forest and desert beasts blocked escape routes. Winged predators circled above, talons ready. Ocean serpents churned the water, cutting off retreat. And humanity stood among them, no longer weak, no longer helpless. Soldiers, civilians, engineers, and children alike had fought with courage and determination. They had learned from the monsters, grown with them, and earned their place in this final hour. The Vorin could not conquer Earth because the people of Earth were never alone. The aliens screamed, begging for life, for mercy, for anything to save them from the wrath they had never imagined. But the monsters of Earth did not strike without purpose. They had been called forth to defend a world, to protect its children, to restore balance. Mercy was not given freely. It was a gift reserved for those who respected strength and life. The Vorin had chosen terror. They had chosen conquest. Now they would learn the cost of underestimating a world united. From the ruins, Lena whispered to her brother, "Look, they're stopping." They watched as the Vorin soldiers surrendered, some fleeing in desperation, others frozen in fear. The monsters had not attacked indiscriminately. They had stopped when the threat ended, when humans were safe, when the invaders had begged. Their actions were both terrifying and beautiful. They were justice. They were protection. They were the embodiment of a planet's will. Kethar's flagship trembled under the waves of monsters' attacks. And he finally understood no technology, no cruelty, no fear could overcome unity and courage. Humans had survived because they had fought together with beings older than memory itself. They had survived because Earth itself had risen to defend them. As night fell over the battlefield, the monsters slowly returned to their forests, oceans, and mountains. Humans, battered but unbroken, tended to the wounded, salvaged what they could, and stared at the sky with wonder. They had survived the Voron. They had fought alongside guardians that were once myths. They had seen what courage, unity, and loyalty could achieve. And in the shadows, Admiral Kethar's voice trembled as he recorded his report. Earth is not weak. Earth is alive. And humanity is more than I ever imagined. For the first time, the invaders knew what it meant to beg for mercy. And for the first time, they understood that the monsters of Earth only answered to those who threatened its children. The humans had won. The monsters had protected. And the galaxy would never forget the day the monsters of Earth answered the cries of their children. The dawn rose slowly over a world scarred by battle. Cities were shattered, streets were torn, and the air still carried the acrid smell of smoke and burning metal. But for the first time in months, there was silence that felt different. Peaceful, almost sacred. The monsters of Earth had returned to their hidden homes, and humanity stood amid the ruins, exhausted but alive. They had survived. They had fought. And they had learned something more powerful than any weapon. They were not alone. Lena walked carefully through the streets with her brother and a group of survivors. Their hands were blackened with dust and ash, their faces streaked with tears and sweat, but their eyes held wonder. They saw massive claw marks in buildings, broken winged guardians' feathers scattered across the ground, and deep scars in the roads where the monsters had struck. These were the remnants of protectors, not invaders. They were alive signs of loyalty, courage, and raw ancient power. Soldiers moved carefully among the ruins, carrying wounded civilians and comforting the grieving. Engineers began repairing essential structures, and families reunited, embracing with trembling hands and whispered prayers. Every survivor understood the same truth. Earth had chosen to defend its children, and humanity had risen to meet that protection with courage. The monsters had not lingered to take credit. Forest guardians returned to deep woods, their massive forms disappearing among the trees. Serpentine ocean creatures slid beneath waves, leaving only ripples behind. Winged predators circled once over the cities before disappearing toward distant mountains. They were guardians, not conquerors, protectors rather than rulers. And humans finally understood that this world had always been alive with power, power that they could now respect, admire, and trust. In the city square, Lena and her brother paused beside the ruins of a fountain, watching the sunlight glint off broken metal and shattered glass. Her brother whispered, "Do you think they'll come back if we need them?" Lena smiled softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I think they'll always be there, watching, protecting. We just have to live in a way that honors them." Humanity had changed. The survivors had seen the impossible, faced overwhelming fear, and survived against an enemy that had crushed countless worlds. They had fought beside creatures thought to be myths, and they had emerged stronger, braver, and wiser. Hope was no longer fragile, it was forged in fire, tested in battle, and tempered by courage. Even the young ones, who had cowered in shelters just days before, now helped carry supplies, guided wounded friends, and shared stories of the monsters' bravery. Stories that would become legends told for generations. Stories that would teach children that courage and loyalty could rise even in the darkest times. In the oceans, fishermen watched the waters, hoping for another glimpse of the serpentine guardians. Sailors whispered to one another, "They saved us. They saved everything." And it was true. Every human who had survived owed their life in part to these ancient protectors. The creatures had fought not for glory, not for conquest, but for Earth itself, for the humans who were its children. Even the deserts, once empty and silent, seemed to hum with life as desert guardians returned to hidden caves. Their eyes, reflecting the sunlight, reminded humans that the planet itself had memory, intelligence, and power. It had chosen to defend the weak, protect its children, and strike mercilessly against those who threatened them. And humanity had earned its place beside that power. Lena looked at the sky as the wind carried a distant roar from a winged predator far above. She felt a deep swell of gratitude and awe. Humanity had survived not just because of courage, but because they had been chosen for protection. And that bond, The bond between humans and Earth itself was something that no conqueror could ever break. Across the cities, rebuilding began. Families returned to homes that could be repaired. Soldiers helped rebuild what the monsters had not destroyed. Guided by the lessons of courage and unity they had learned in battle, schools reopened slowly, but children now whispered stories of winged predators, forest guardians, and sea serpents. These were no longer myths, they were living truth. Admiral Kethar, far above the planet, recorded his final report. His voice trembled as he spoke, acknowledging a truth he could not escape. Earth is not weak, humanity is not fragile, and the monsters answer to those who protect their children. I have underestimated this world, and I will never forget it. For the first time, the invader understood that mercy and power were not mere tools. They were earned and respected. As night fell, Lena and her brother returned to a shelter with other survivors. They watched the stars appear, countless points of light twinkling in the vast sky. Somewhere beyond sight, the guardians of Earth rested, but their presence was felt. Humanity would not forget. Earth had shown its strength, and humans had risen to meet it with courage, respect, and loyalty. In the hearts of every survivor, a quiet promise took root. Humanity would protect their planet, honor the guardians, and never forget the day when Earth itself answered the cries of its children. It was a lesson of courage, mercy, and strength that would echo through generations. The monsters of Earth had come when they were needed most. They had struck with fearsome power against the invaders, yet they had shown restraint, wisdom, and protection. And humans had survived, grown, and learned that sometimes the greatest power is not just in strength, but in unity, courage, and the bonds that tie life together. The world was scarred, but it was alive. Humanity had fought, survived, and earned its place beside the guardians of the planet. And for the first time in history, they understood something that no invader could take away. Some worlds do not bow. Some species do not kneel. And some monsters are more than legends. They are protectors, friends, and symbols of the strength that comes when a planet chooses to fight for its children. The wind carried the echoes of distant roars across the cities, forests, oceans, and mountains. It was a sound of life, of courage, and of enduring hope. Earth had survived. Humanity had survived. And together, they would face whatever came next. Not with fear, but with courage, unity, and the knowledge that they were never truly alone.